This is the most populous city in the United States. It is also home to a lot of rats, about 3 million of them.
New York City has spent 100 years and hundreds of millions of dollars losing a war it refuses to admit it cannot win. The current population estimate stands at 3 million Norway rats, a figure that has grown by 50% in a single decade, despite every trap, every poison contract, every initiative the most powerful municipal government in the Western Hemisphere has deployed against it. In 2017, the city launched a $32 million targeted reduction program, appointed a dedicated rat czar, and flooded 3 of the densest infestation corridors with resources at a scale that had never been attempted before. The population continued to climb. Exterminators with decades of field experience stated plainly that the rats were adapting faster than the interventions could be designed. Every metric the city tracked pointed to the same conclusion. The infestation was structurally unsolvable at the street level. Then, in November, a researcher named Dr. Rachel Oakfer pulled the complaint data for the single most heavily infested block cluster in her 11-year monitoring dataset, and the numbers were moving in the wrong direction. Not declining slowly, not flattening, dropping at a velocity that no extermination contract, no sanitation overhaul, and no city program in the recorded history of New York rodent management had ever produced. No new initiative had been launched in that zone. The city had not changed a single variable on those streets. Something out there was dismantling a rat population that had survived a century of direct human assault, and it was doing it without a budget, without a task force, and without anyone in the municipal government knowing it had started. Dr. Oakfer spent 3 days cross-referencing every possible variable before she contacted the Urban Ecology Coordination Office. When she described the data, the ecologist on the other end of the line asked her one question she had not thought to consider in 11 years of street-level tracking. He asked her whether she had looked up. She had not. Nobody had. New York fought back with everything it had. But to understand why that fight was always going to fail, you have to understand what it was actually fighting. The Norway rat, Rattus norvegicus, arrived in North America on grain ships sometime in the 1700s and has not lost a single meaningful battle since. It carries 35 documented pathogens, including leptospirosis, hantavirus, and rat bite fever. It gnaws through concrete, compromises load-bearing infrastructure, and destroys an estimated $19 billion in stored food globally every year. A single breeding pair, left undisturbed for 12 months, can theoretically produce 15,000 descendants. In New York City, they are never undisturbed, and they still reached 3 million. That number is the devastating simplicity at the center of this story. The rat does not need ideal conditions. It does not need safety. It needs only to breed faster than it is killed. And for 300 years in New York City, it has done exactly that in sewers, in subway tunnels, inside the walls of residential buildings, on streets that humans walk every single day without knowing what is moving beneath their feet. The city understood the scale of this eventually. The question was what it chose to do about it. The city chose to spend $32 million finding out the hard way. In 2017, New York launched the Rat Reduction Initiative, targeting the Bronx, Harlem, and Bedford-Stuyvesant, the 3 highest-density infestation corridors in the 5 boroughs. The program deployed solar-powered compacting bins to eliminate surface food access, upgraded underground sewer infrastructure, flooded active borough systems with dry ice, and introduced second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides at concentrations the EPA had never previously approved for municipal use. In 2023, the city appointed its first-ever rat czar, a formal government position whose sole mandate was the systematic reduction of the urban rat population. The population grew by 50%. That is the devastating simplicity of the failure, not a marginal increase, not a plateau, a 50% expansion in a decade during which the city tried harder than it had ever tried before. A veteran exterminator with 22 years of contract work across all 5 boroughs said it plainly in a 2022 industry interview: every horizontal intervention the city designed the rats mapped, avoided, and eventually routed around traps, poison stations, compactors. The rats learned the street-level geometry of every tool deployed against them. Every tool aimed at the ground. Then the 311 complaint data stopped making sense, and the question was no longer what the city was doing wrong, but where it was refusing to look. What the complaint data was showing was not a reduction program. It was a behavioral suppression effect, and the distinction mattered enormously. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent 8 years as a senior urban wildlife ecologist conducting systematic transect surveys across New York City's building corridors, green spaces, and elevated infrastructure zones. His dataset was not rodent data. It was raptor data. When Oakfor forwarded him the anomaly map in late November, Webb did not look at the street level. He overlaid his own 8 years of aerial wildlife, tracking directly on top of her 11 years of complaint coordinates, and the correlation was immediate and exact. The steepest rat complaint declines in Oakfor's dataset corresponded precisely to the building corridors where Webb's transects had logged the highest concentrations of large aerial predators, not approximately, not as a general trend. Block cluster by block cluster, the two independent datasets traced the same geography. The devastating simplicity, the rats were not being exterminated, they were being hunted from above by something the city's entire management apparatus had never once factored into a budget line. Webb pulled the specific species data from those corridors and went quiet for 2 days before he called Oakfor back. Are you seeing unusual wildlife shifts in your own city? Drop your exact geographic location in the comments right now and tell us what's hunting in your area. Now back to the data, because what comes next is even more disturbing. Webb called back with a single species name, and to understand why that name changed everything, you have to understand what 300 years of New York City did to the rat's neurology. Rattus norvegicus arrived in an urban environment defined entirely by ground-level threats. Cats, dogs, terriers bred specifically for subterranean kills, human exterminators working at street level with traps, poisons, and mechanical pressure. Over 3 centuries of continuous predatory pressure from the horizontal plane, the New York rat evolved one of the most sophisticated lateral threat detection systems in the mammalian world. Its whisker sensitivity can register air displacement from a moving object at close range. Its peripheral vision spans nearly 300 degrees. At the first registered movement on the ground plane, a healthy adult rat can initiate an evasive response in under 70 milliseconds. Because for most of those 300 years, there was no predator to encode from above. That is the devastating simplicity of the blind spot. The rat's defense system is not inadequate. It is complete in every direction except one: vertical. The neural architecture that makes the Norway rat effectively unkillable at street level contains no encoding whatsoever for a threat arriving from directly overhead at 200 miles per hour. What Webb had found in those building corridors was the only predator on Earth that could exploit that gap. The species was the peregrine falcon, Falco peregrinus, and Webb did not describe it in ecological terms. He described it in ballistic ones. The peregrine is the fastest animal on Earth, capable of reaching 240 miles per hour in a vertical stoop. It does not approach its prey horizontally. It climbs to altitude in New York City, using the ledge architecture of skyscrapers as cliff faces, folds its wings to a 45-degree tuck, and drops. The entire strike sequence, from fold to impact, takes under 2 seconds. The rat's 70-millisecond evasive response never fires. There is no lateral movement to register, no ground plane displacement, no whisker signal, nothing. The threat arrives from a direction the rat's nervous system has never been asked to process in 300 years of urban evolution. The devastating simplicity: the falcon does not outrun the rat. It attacks from the one angle the rat cannot see. 3 weeks after Webb's call, Dr. Oakfor stood on a pavement in Upper Manhattan and watched it happen. She saw a peregrine drop from a building ledge approximately 60 feet overhead and kill a rat in the middle of a pedestrian block in under 2 seconds. Hundreds of people walked past that corner every day without once looking up. The falcons hunted from dawn until dusk, but when the sun went down, something else took over. We are actively tracking the expansion of urban raptors. Leave your city and state below if you've seen a falcon or owl hunting in your downtown corridors. Now back to the data, because what comes next is even more disturbing. What takes over is the great horned owl, Bubo virginianus, and where the peregrine is a precision strike weapon, the owl is a silent, weight-bearing shadow that the rat never hears until the talon's close. The great horned owl hunts from park margins and tree canopy lines at the edges of the infestation corridors, dropping vertically from perches up to 60 feet high, with wings fully extended to suppress all air displacement. Its facial disc channels sound with the precision of a parabolic antenna, locating a rat's position in complete darkness from the audio signature of a single footstep. The rat's 300-degree peripheral vision is irrelevant. The owl generates no ground plane visual signature, no lateral movement, no whisker-triggering air disturbance. It arrives as weight from above. The peregrine closes the daylight window. The great horned owl opens the nocturnal one. Webb's data added a third layer still, red-tailed hawks applying continuous daytime pressure across the secondary corridors where falcon territories do not overlap. 3 species, 3 hunting windows, a continuous, overlapping cycle of aerial suppression running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, across the highest density infestation zones in the city. The devastating simplicity. No extermination contractor in New York City's history has ever operated around the clock for free. None of this was planned, and that is the part that should stop everyone reading this completely cold. Some things only fully make sense when you finally look up. 1972, the United States federal government passed the Endangered Species Act. In the years that followed, New York City participated in a series of peregrine falcon reintroduction programs specifically designed to reverse the near-total raptor population collapse caused by DDT exposure. The programs cost millions. They were administered by ornithologists, wildlife biologists, and conservation agencies whose mandate was the restoration of native bird populations. Not a single line in any program document, budget proposal, or municipal wildlife management plan from 1972 through 2023 referenced urban rodent suppression as a projected outcome or secondary benefit. The city's rodent management office and its conservation programs operated in completely separate institutional silos for 50 years. They never spoke to each other. They never compared data. The $32 million rat reduction initiative of 2017 was designed, funded, and executed without any wildlife ecologist in the room. The devastating simplicity. The city accidentally hired the most effective rat exterminators in its history in 1972, and then spent the next 5 decades and tens of millions of dollars duplicating their work at street level, with worse results at enormous cost, while the actual solution circled silently overhead. The only question left is whether that solution can hold. The pattern, once you see it, cannot be unseen. City spent 100 years engineering increasingly sophisticated solutions to a problem it never understood correctly. The threat was not the rat's resilience. The threat was the city's angle of attack. Every trap, every poison contract, every rat czar, every solar compactor was aimed at the same horizontal plane, the one plane where the rat had spent 300 years becoming impossible to kill. The answer was never at street level. It was never going to be at street level. It was circling at 60 feet, waiting for a researcher to finally look up. 3 million rats, a $32 million failure, 11 years of data, one unanswered question, one researcher who looked in the right direction. And the mechanism that answered it had been operating silently, without budget, without acknowledgement, and without a single line item in any city document for 50 years. What this means is not a story about rats. It is a story about the systems working in the background of every environment that human institutions have decided are already fully understood. Nature does not wait for permission to solve the problems we have given up on. It self-corrects around our blind spots, quietly, continuously, from angles we are not looking. That is not a comforting thought, it is a clarifying one. We spent decades thinking urban infestations were a problem of human engineering versus animal biology. We were wrong. But New York City is not the only place where nature is rewriting the rules. In the watersheds of the Pacific Northwest, a completely different apex dynamic is dismantling a century of flood management assumptions, and the data trail is nearly identical to what Oakfor found. Click the video on your screen right now to see what they found in the watershed. Subscribe to Prime Discoveries to join the research collective, and we will see you in the next file. The falcons were never hunting for us, they were just hungry.